Welcome everyone, Simon here from the Wells of Wall Street. We have an XDC video right in front of us today. Haven't covered XDC for a couple of weeks, but very interesting integration announcement in the last 24 hours or so. We'll go through that in a second. Really excited about this one, being a holder of both of these projects, of course. Guys, do not forget to check out the other videos on the channel. Loads of topics and discussions, loads of new interviews have been out over the last month or two as well. Go check those out as well when you get a chance. And of course, don't forget to subscribe to the channel if you haven't done so already. And let's plow through this one, guys. Exciting times. So if you haven't heard already, ANKR has partnered with XDC, launching the RPC integration for finance and asset tokenization. So this is absolutely brilliant to hear. Certainly two of my favorite projects colliding, coming together with this exciting development aspect of the blockchains and the protocols coming together. So RPC standing for Remote Procedure Call, is particularly a node aspect of the protocol. Go into a bit more detail about that in a second, but for me, this is really interesting development for XDC. ANKR is very predominant around dApps, and this is certainly, in my opinion, an area that's going to take charge for sure over the coming years as more and more people come into the space, and the requirement for dApps, both in development and usage, will continue to increase significantly. But I just read this passage here, and we're going to a bit more of a deep dive into this and my thoughts and feelings around this as well. So just very quickly, for those that don't know ANKR, so I've been holding this one for a few years now, and it's actually, again, another one that came to fruition in my portfolio through watching Cheeky Crypto back in the day properly. And I've been holding it ever since. I haven't really even bought any for a long time. I wouldn't say I forgot about it. It's just sat in my ledger under the Binance Smart Chain, I think. So I need to double check that. But yes, let's just quickly read these two first paragraphs here. So Premier Web3 Developer Solutions Hub ANKR has announced a major partnership with XDC Network, an open source enterprise grade layer 1 blockchain. I like that line. With the former's remote procedures calls services seeing an implementation on the latter's protocol and ecosystem. So ANKR's integration with XDC Network will see critical functions of the two systems bridged into dApps and crypto wallets on the XDC chain, helping empower developers for efficiency gains across self-hosted XDC nodes. This saves a lot of time and resources for developers, making the ecosystem of XDC more accessible for developers and contributing to the network's growth and industry-wide impact. So it's coming at a really good time, as XinFin has been massively developing over the last couple of years, particularly the last 12 months, where more and more announcements are coming out about its integrations within the whole kind of world sphere, if you like, of the financial industry. And it's certainly showcasing a lot of its capabilities and integration partners. And a lot of people always ask in the comments, or make a comment at least, around how many partners do XDC actually have? And it's not always very clear. I mean, there's a number of them that are building on the ecosystem of XinFin. But if you look really closely, and you have more of an open mind policy, in the sense that there's a lot of activity going on at very high levels, guys, particularly as we've seen with the trade finance aspects more recent in times, especially as well around the electronic trade acts going on here in the UK, and a lot of that influenced by the TFDI, so the Trade Finance Distribution Initiative. Of course, a huge member of that, Andre Casterman, and there's a multitude of other people involved heavily in this as well. You don't have to look too far to see where XDC comes into play, whether it be conversation stage or at least already integrated or developing in these aspects. And this is why I think this particular integration is very exciting. As I said, not just because I'm holding ANKR, but I understand what ANKR is capable of, the power that be within it. And I'll just pull up a few numbers here. Let's talk about this in a bit more detail here. So typically, an RPC node can essentially bypass unnecessary or difficult situations within communication protocols. So systems talking to each other, it's kind of hard to visualize that, to be honest. Maybe I should get like a simplified video on this, but in this instance, we could relate maybe the application taking or talking back and forth with blockchain mechanisms in a real efficient way. So ANKR particularly specializes in this area and prominence within dApps. So this sector, in my opinion, is going to get very strong these coming years. In fact, some of these stats alone, just on the screen here, we see how ANKR's perspective alone encourages how big this opportunity is. I mean, 8 billion daily RPC requests. So of course, this is a multitude of different chains and partners that they work with. In fact, the building of cross-chain and cross-platforms is absolutely significant, and it showcases, 8 billion is huge. And from a development perspective, some of the developers might think that's just early days, and it kind of is really. But look at the amount of developers building within these systems and the regions and the global aspect of what it covers. You can see why XDC's Infin want to have this integration aspect and start liaising with them and getting to the levels that others are at. I mean, when I say that, I'm not saying that they're not having the capabilities of other projects that have been doing this for a long time. What I mean is that there's a requirement now. You don't just do things for the sake of it. XDC is at a really pinnacle point, in my opinion, and especially for these next coming years where everyone's fighting for these same spaces, and particularly in the finance and the trade finance areas, it becomes even more prominent. So putting this back to the RPCs in general, I think you'll find developers will welcome this. And I'm going to try and get a few developers on the channel as well to not just discuss this, but also just the representation of developers within the blockchain space. It might even encourage a new wave of people coming in to want to learn this area of expertise. But I think the main critical point is understanding a lot more about this. I'm no expert at all. I just have done diplomas in blockchain cryptography, but I have some limitations on exactly how things work. And I do try and absorb that when I can. A lot of people don't care. A lot of people just want to know the price point. I just find it really interesting and an opportunity to learn as much as possible about the things that you're investing in. But yes, this is certainly a substantial integration in my opinion, and an opportunity perhaps for XDC's Infin to really excel further. It'd be really interesting to know what you guys think in the comments below, but I think particularly from the interoperability perspective, which is a huge race right now, many of the projects that we cover are heavily involved in that interoperability narrative, and I think that's extremely important when you're talking about cross-border payments, the integration of banks worldwide and things like this, and not just the finance system. XDC's Infin boasts that hybrid and that public aspect of its chain as well. So I think with this dApps application, it can open it up to many, many sectors. And I think that's probably another reason why they've done that. And very much around RPC in terms of the development side of things, it's huge on the scalability factor as well, which is obviously very important for multiple systems working simultaneously. That's what I feel anyway. But yeah, I highly recommend actually, guys, perhaps looking into blockchain knowledge courses, or even if it's diplomas, you take your time on it, because in my opinion it massively benefited me to understand a lot of these buzzwords and keywords that get thrown out here and there, but more importantly, a bit more of an understanding as to why companies do these integrations. And thinking ahead as well is to think okay, what's this project that I'm investing in? What are they doing in the future? What's on their roadmap? And understanding how that is possible, and then understanding obviously the back end of that, how it all works together. I mean, things like the more in-depth around block hashes and things like this, you can learn a lot about that. Even just the simplistic terms, or in fact, at the very least, I may just leave a really cool article actually around RPC in general in the description and the comments, so do check that out. It might give a bit of a better overview on this, or how better I'm explaining it. I'm just trying to give a bit more of a top overview as to why they're perhaps doing this, and particularly the strengths of ANKR and Infin collectively coming together to try and pull this together. I think it's really fascinating. I think it's very exciting. But for sure, I think this is a fantastic integration between the two projects and technology partners. So guys, as I said, this is news that's come out quite recently. I'm sure over time we're going to see the fruitions of this, and I wouldn't be surprised at all to see more and more dApp application, not just the application because that's what dApps are, but I mean the application of dApps within this ecosystem. So maybe more projects being built within the Infin network with the ability of, or utilization of, the ANKR solutions to help with that as well. And I think, in my opinion as well, from a developer's perspective, it will bring more and more people to the Zimfin XDC network to work on there. And if you think about this, where we talked about 40,000 odd distinct developers using ANKR system, you could argue, I'm throwing numbers out here, but let's say only 10% or even 50% of that 40,000 knew about Zimfin XDC. Now we know for a fact that can be marketed to the Zimfin network and vice versa, and utilize these developers that are working on other chains and integrations. And communication goes really far, guys. The networking ability. There's a lot of projects that could come to Zimfin and go, oh, I didn't know about you guys. You seem to boast a lot of information that's critical in terms of maybe transactions per second, all these things that are really critical to scalability and the usage of the chains, and maybe switch from the chain they're using to Zimfin, and particularly from a sector perspective, that might become interesting as well. So I think there's a really interesting opportunity here from the marketing, the communication perspective, the networking perspective, and ultimately more developers coming onto the system, and ultimately more people using the XDC token, which ultimately, hopefully, pulls that price up eventually as well. And of course, there's loads of other factors that need to come into play for the charts and everything like that. But that aside, I think is very interesting indeed. And finally, probably just worth mentioning here, the firm has launched its innovative liquid staking system. Unlike traditional staking where the assets are locked, thus liquid staking provides a more flexible approach in which users will receive tokens representing their staked assets. These tokens can then be traded or used tradable and can be used in various other DeFi protocols. So I just want to mention that because, again, it's that point of cooperation with other chains and other logistic elements within protocol development and various chains in the ecosystem. This is what I mean. If you start using the power of a lot of these projects, listing of developers and contacts that they have, it could really significantly bring more and more people to your network and your foundation to work on. So really exciting stuff, guys. I think on that point, we could probably discuss very briefly as well about the price point of XDC. Now, we haven't seen too much market traction around this announcement. I wasn't anticipating it to anyway with the market that we've got today. And sometimes you see a few bounces, but with XDC in particular, we've seen a downward trend for some time, of course, and certainly something that we saw with that huge uprise around that trade finance information that was coming out around sort of July, August time. Took it up to a high of around 9-10 cents, and we now retrace back already to around this 4.7 cent mark as well. So I think the critical points for me at this moment in time are some of the wonderful circles that we drew previously coming back into our remit. And the reason I drew these circles in previously were areas of interest on that way down, of areas to potentially accumulate and add more XDC to my portfolio, where there's a bit more stability and on track with a lot of previous data as well. So from the previous big bull cycle back here in 2021, the price point went all the way up here to around 20 cents. So when I was buying XDC, I was getting a lot of it around that sort of 1 to 2 cent mark, and we'll see the big traction up. I didn't sell any, but you always know that it was going to come down at some point, and then you make the adjustments with dollar cost averaging, which is a big strategy that I use all the time to try and remit or remove the opportunity for risk, and ultimately taking that kind of momentum in your mind to say, well, what levels are we at where we could be a bit more stable, that we're not going to have that huge volatility on the upward or the downward spectrum. Obviously, we don't have a crystal ball, so we try and take percentage of accumulation at various different areas on tactical methods, particularly ones that have worked for me personally. This is not financial advice, but just my opinions and what's worked for me in the past. It's just look at these critical day points, not just in the fib retracement levels, but you can clearly see it visually as well in these line charts too. So here we can see there's very, very limited data at this rough kind of price point around this 4.7 mark. And ironically, and I haven't moved that long-term one for some time, to be fair. And in fact, that bar, one that we drew some time ago, this is very much matching with the current price point. So eventually they do come in. And that's why I tend to put buying positions slightly above those lines, or those areas and slightly below them. I don't always go for the pinpoint area, because from a trader's perspective, and especially with the utilization of AI and trade bots and stuff these days, you kind of have to have your orders, if you do it that way, like I do in certain instances, at those slightly higher and slightly lower pinpoints around those data points. So at the moment, we're hitting back at this point, and you see here, this is again a circle that I drew in previous videos, I think way back. This is an area of interest to me as well, that lower 4 cent region. It's kind of common sense in your mind, really, that if we're getting to 4.5, the next stage in a rounded number perspective is always 4 cents. But that is backed up again with the fact that we have resistance in a couple of areas back in 2021, 2022, respectively. We had a rejection here in May 2022 and resistance on the way up at around about this area on the 15th of April. So this is why I'm interested in this area. You can see these spike ups where we've had some really perhaps announcement activity or some scaled up trading going on in these few random days here and there. They always can't break that particular boundary between the 4 and the 4.5 cent mark. So that's why I've got my orders in, the limit orders here. I tend to do some manual ones as well. If I see stability, i.e. sideways trading going on for a week at least around this sort of 4.5 to 4.8 cent mark, I will do some manual options, and I'll be waiting with a capital limit order back at these lower regions too. And I still have one down here, and again, based on the fact that actually realistically there is not enough data points to suggest that even this is a proper foundational support level. And with the market that we're in, the winter market, all the things going on around the world, there's no reason why this couldn't come down to these areas. So that doesn't mean I get paid and I chuck all my money at these particular areas. It just means that I've kind of understood in my mind or accommodated enough money to go, okay, I'm going to do positions here, here, and here in this percentage format. If they come in, great. If they don't, it's not a loss, because we're still doing things in a risk management way. And that's kind of how it's worked for me in the past. I mean, there's a load of YouTube videos out there, guys, for really professional expert traders. I'm not an expert at all, albeit that I do have certifications in Forex trading and stuff like this. I think it's important that everyone has their own strategy, their own research, of course, behind this as well, and just the planning momentum. I think the key things, the only things I could mention as an opinion advice aspect is, start assessing risk management really well, and your planning ability, the organization ability of this as well. So really start looking at those things. And as I said before in the ANKR conversation, it's good to see some courses out there. Get involved, even if they're free ones, just little webinars and stuff like that. Picking up little basic information is really good to understand that more, so you don't get caught out with crazy volatility or mishaps of judgment and things like that, and just remove the emotion, of course, always. So this is where we're at with the price point. I do anticipate some sideways action here, and I do honestly potentially I would say potentially, just to back myself up, I do anticipate, I suppose is a better word, this coming down a bit further to at least test this area again, just based on data. It may or may not come in for sure, but what I see in front of me suggests that it could. And those are great buy points. I think with XDC in the future, even just getting back up to that previous all-time at 20 cents is a good move, and it's a good opportunity for gains. In fact, I'll just draw that in really quickly here. So we're just on the 4.7, was it? I think it's roughly around here. If we take it back up to that previous all-time high, it's a good 300-ish% gain. I think that's really respectable. If we're taking it up to the next higher levels of XDC, where a lot of people anticipate it to get to, at least in the next bull run towards that 50 cent mark as a bare minimum, that's what people are saying, that's about 1,000% gain. Now, absolutely, I'd be very excited if that came in. For sure, if I'm buying at the positions of under 10 cents, I think it's a relatively good return in that aspect. But we just play it by ear, and I accumulate as and when I can. The other point is that I look at, if we look at the bottom left hand here, is the RSI's Relative Strength Index. For me, again, just confirming that kind of manual options over the next few days. If it continues to stay around that 40 or under mark, or I usually say 42 on the 14-day. If it stays under 42 on the 14-day, I will be doing more manual option purchases of XDC into my portfolio. And the 20-day is showing a very much a low area around 40 as well. So what that says to us is that there's obviously more opportunity for an upside than there is down, obviously, but it just puts it into a bit more of an identifier when you look at all the different indicators and the different areas that we can sort of confirm and validate things ourselves when we look at the chart analysis. So hopefully that's a few pointers, and as I said, I just think it's really beneficial to go and learn yourselves as best you can in different ways that you can, and just don't take one person's word for it or like your favorite YouTuber or anything like that. Just do what you can to research and learn yourself. And then finally, on the right hand side here, the performance indicators, we can see that most of it's in green still. That's very much a bit skewed in the sense that we had this big announcement area at the beginning, it was around mid-July, towards the end and beginning of August, so that kind of plays into that. So I'm not too fussed about that. What I would say about this is that it shows you that we've had that big up cycle. Yes, of course, it could happen again at any time with another big announcement. Who knows? I mean, the TFDI event, which I'm attending, fortunately, next Friday, who knows what could come out of that? I know there's XDC representation there hugely. But that aside, we can also identify that, okay, it's had a big up run. There's a bit of downside here. I could be a bit more patient here, potentially with accumulation options. So there's lots you can take from that. But from the weekly and the monthly, it's showcasing in my head, again, confirming from another indicator perspective that we might see some sideways options there, and probably see that 3 month come down a bit more as well as time goes by. So that's a few things to think about and look at, guys. I'm going to wrap that up there. I think it's a very exciting integration and partnership between ANKR and XDC, and certainly some really interesting opportunities with accumulating XDC in these coming weeks and months. Thank you for watching. We'll see you in the next XDC update video. Take care. Bye-bye.